Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 13 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is taking risks. Our quote of the day comes to us from Mark Zuckerberg. In a world that's changing so quickly, you're guaranteed to fail if you don't take any risks. This episode of the No Quit Living podcast is brought to you by the I3 Initiative. In today's society, it is easy to get caught up in the drama, negativity, and uncertainty in the universe we are a part of. Against those challenges, we are committed to make the world a better place through improvement, impact, and integrity. You are invited to join our mission and learn more about our book club, membership, live events, and mastermind at i3initiative.com. That's the letter I, the number 3, initiative.com. It is an honor to bring you today's episode. Our guest is one of the most dynamic individuals we have interviewed so far. In addition to being a New York Times bestselling author, a grandfather to 17 grandchildren, and a father of 16 children, he also happens to be the Senior Vice President of the Orlando Magic. It is my pleasure to introduce Pat Williams. As I know your time is extremely valuable, we'll jump right into today's episode. With all the negativity throughout the media today, the foundation of our podcast is to motivate and inspire people to never give up. I wanted to ask you if you had a personal story you could share with our audience about perseverance or a challenging time that tested you, but you kept on going and never quit.
Well, Chris, probably the most recent one would be my bout with cancer. I was diagnosed in January of 2011 with multiple myeloma, which is one of the blood cancers. And that was a shocking piece of news, obviously. But the doctors explained to me they were going to get me started on the medication right away. And eventually I had a stem cell transplant. I continued to be treated, and I'm doing quite well with it and truck on with it. But when you're faced with a cancer diagnosis, you can either fold up and sit on the sideline and just pack it in as far as life is concerned, or you can hang tough and keep going and live your life to the fullest, and that's what I've elected to do. So I would say that's probably the most recent example of perseverance and tenacity and sticking with it when things aren't easy.
That's a great story as far as you know, you can fold it up and pack it in, or you can hang tough and fight it. And obviously you did the latter. So I'm glad that you are doing that. You've had a quite successful career that has spanned 2 different professional sports and obviously 2 major cities. As your involvement with the Orlando Magic, I know that you were incredibly influential and a key component in helping bring a professional team to Orlando. And I'm sure many people said it couldn't happen or perhaps it wasn't possible, but I was curious what kept you motivated and committed to the process, which eventually culminated with the Magic officially coming to Orlando.
Well, I think what kept me motivated was I had a family, and at that point had 6 children, and if we hadn't been successful, well, we'd have been floating out there somewhere and not knowing where we were going or what was going to happen. So there were a lot of personal reasons to make this happen. But above all, when I came here, I've really gotten engrossed with the Orlando community and the business leaders and the government leaders and so many people who had bought into our dream of bringing pro basketball, bringing the NBA to Central Florida, that I really felt strongly that we had to get that team so we wouldn't let this community down. They were so excited and so eager for the NBA to come to Orlando and become a major league city that I did everything in my power to make that happen.
Well, you definitely did a good job in regards to that. Speaking of children, you said at the time you had 8. Now, how many children in total are there out there?
Well, we have 19 children. They're all adults now. The oldest is 45. The youngest is 31. So they're all out on their own. and they have presented us with 17 grandchildren at this point. So we've got a big international family. We adopted 14 of those children from 4 foreign countries. So that would be called an international family, that's for sure.
Wow, that puts a whole new thought process behind it. I have 3 kids myself, and I can barely keep up with them, so I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have 19, let alone 17 grandchildren. So that's pretty amazing in many ways. You have written some great books in your career that cover a wide range of topics. I've read many of them, and it might be a tough question, but I was curious if you have 1 or 2 favorites that you've had written over the past few years.
Chris, I think it's like children. They're all your favorites. But my favorite is always the most recent one, and hopefully with each book, I'm getting better at it. And the latest book that's come out just weeks ago is called The Success Intersection. And it's about when your greatest talent intersects with your strongest passion. Well, then you have discovered the sweet spot in your life. And that's where you want to live. That's where you want to work. That's where you want to get paid every 2 weeks. Right there at that intersection of your greatest talent and your strongest passion. So that's what I've written about in this most recent book. It's just out, Chris, and we're having a good time talking about it.
No, that is awesome. I will definitely have to get a copy of that, and I will share with the listeners as well at the end of the podcast to make sure that they take a look at that as well. Now, many of our listeners, Pat, are into personal development, and I was curious if you have a favorite book or if you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to some of our listeners, perhaps.
Well, that's a good question. I think anything that John Maxwell writes about leadership and success is well worth reading. Anything that the late Zig Ziglar wrote is well worth reading. And I would say, Chris, I've written numbers of books about personal development. Sometime back, I wrote a book called Who Wants to Be a Champion? Last year, a book came out called Extreme Winning, in which I talk about the 12 common qualities of the extreme winners. So those are some thoughts that come to my mind immediately.
No, those are both great books. One of my favorites that you wrote is "It's not who you know, it's who you are." I've gone through that many times, and what I like about that is it's got a lot of short stories or short pieces on so many different successful people. And I was curious what motivated you or inspired you to write that book.
Well, through my career in sports, which now spans, I guess, 55 years, Chris, I've been very fortunate to have been around some very, very interesting people in the sports world and in entertainment or government, the ministry, different areas. And there's a story attached to many of those people. And so I thought it would be interesting if we wrote some short story. We ended up writing, well over 100 of them, Chris, of these different people that I had encountered. And so it's an easy read. These are stories that take half a page or maybe a full page. But it was fun to look back for me and recollect and reminisce about these people. And I shared it in that book. I think there were lessons to be learned from these various people that I did run into, all of whom you'll have heard of. And the end result was this book. It's not who you know, it's who you are. And easy reading and some fun stories, Chris. That's the meat of that book.
It's a great book, and one of my favorites is the piece you touch on with Bill Russell. And being a diehard basketball fan myself, I didn't know until I read the book that after every single game, Bill Russell gave himself a personal score as he kept a personal scorecard. And over his 1,128 game career, the highest score he ever gave himself was a 65. And I think that's just remarkable in many ways, because some people say that Bill Russell is one of, if not the greatest all-time greatest basketball players ever. And if he only gave himself the highest of a 65, what's that say about the rest of us,
Well, that's that's quite something. Obviously the greatest winner in the history of basketball and probably sports. And Bill Russell was very hard on himself, even though he was among the greatest players of all time. So I guess the lesson there, Chris, is no matter how well we do, we can always do better. Realistically, there's always more that we could have done, I guess. Now, you can go too far with that. Being a perfectionist probably can be a very difficult life to have, but never be satisfied. Always try to improve. We can always do a little bit more and be more valuable. I guess that's the lesson. But Bill Russell was and remains a most unusual man, and there's much to learn from him. Bill, by the way, Bill has written, a number of books himself. He's a very, very intellectual guy, very sharp. A lot to learn from the various books that Bill Russell has written.
Yeah, no, he's written a lot of books. My father was fortunate to have spent some time with him back in the days, and I missed him as far as watching him live, but just talk about a champion on all levels of basketball. I was curious, Pat, if there's a specific morning or daily ritual that you feel has played a significant part in your success, both in your personal as well as your professional life.
Chris, when I get up in the morning, I read 5 newspapers that have been left at the end of my driveway. That's part of my ritual. I spend what we would call quiet time, a time of prayer and Bible reading. Then after my breakfast, I get on the stationary bike I have at my home. I have my own gym right at the house, so I don't have to go anywhere. And I pound that stationary bike for 45 to 50 minutes a day, and then head to the office, catch up on emails and phone calls. I do my writing there, and whatever is coming along with the Orlando Magic that needs attention. And I'm also, Chris, in the evening after dinner, I'm a reader. I have books that I'm interested in, and I spend probably 2 to 4 hours in the evening reading in the different books that I have. And when I finish them, they go into a box and then head off to a library that I'm establishing here at our church, which now numbers about 13,000 books. And I'm always visiting bookstores, probably about once a week, to see what the latest books are. So much of my life is built around my reading.
That's impressive that you can spend 2 to 4 hours in the evening reading, especially with all you have going on, not only in your personal, but as well as your professional life. And I think it just states so much that, you make time for things that are important for you. So I definitely think that's important. One of the areas we often discuss with our guests is getting out of our comfort zone. Can you attribute any of your success to something specific that you have done out of your comfort zone?
Well, Chris, I think it's important to take intelligent risks when necessary. Every successful person at some point took a risk that paid off for them. That, in my case, it would be leaving the 76ers in the summer of 1986 after I'd been there for 12 years. Packing up our family of 6 children and coming to Orlando and trying to spearhead the effort to bring an NBA franchise expansion team here to Orlando. That was probably the biggest risk that I took in my professional life, and it paid off. The team happened and came about, and we're now coming to the end of our 28th season, and we have put deep roots down here in Central Florida. So at some point, I think all of us take a big risk or two in our life. And I encourage people to do that, as long as they've thought it through, I would call it an intelligent risk. But at some point, we all have to do that.
That was quite a risk in regards to moving down, but obviously, as you mentioned, there's a difference between a risk versus an intelligent risk. Here's a question for you, a little bit different than what we've spoken about so far, is if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, Jesus would be there. I think that would be important. I'd like to have Condoleezza Rice there. I think that would be important. I think Coach John Wooden should be at that dinner. And, who else do we want to have? How about Mark Twain? So we'd have Jesus, Mark Twain, John Wooden, and Condoleezza Rice. Ha! Boy, what a meal that would be.
That would be quite an interesting meal. I would like to be invited, or at least sitting at the table next to that. I was very fortunate in 2005 to have dinner with Coach Wooden, and then he invited us back to his apartment, and we spent total that evening about 4 hours with him, and I can tell you that it was one of the most amazing 4 hours of my life. And he's just, as you know, a remarkable man. And this was, I believe he was 92 or 93 at the time. And if you close your eyes and just listen to him, you would think he was 60, 65. I mean, he was just so with it and so intelligent. And one thing he said as we were leaving was, he said, "Chris, would you please mind helping me up? I can't move as much as I can." He said, "But I tell you," he said, "my mind is just as sharp. It's just, unfortunately, my body breaks down." But John Wooden was an unbelievable man. And I think that Jesus, Condoleezza Rice, John Wooden, and Mark Twain would be quite the interesting dinner if we could set that up.
Yeah, go for it, Chris. That would be my advice. And that would just be one dinner. Oh, we could have another dinner probably with Abraham Lincoln, Michael Jordan. We could have Holly Berry, the actress, and then maybe Nick Saban.
That would be another foursome of quite the interesting dinner guest. But before we let you go, Pat, I was curious if you're working on anything. I know you just mentioned your book that's coming out, but anything else that's coming out in the near future you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, Chris, I've written 3 books about Coach Wooden, and we've got a 4th one coming next February. It's called "When John Wooden Coached the World," and it's about the summer camps that he ran for many, many years. And we have tracked down the coaches who worked there, and youngsters who attended the camps, and others. And it's looking at John Wooden away from the pressures of college basketball, but in that summer setting. And what do we learn from Coach Wooden from that period of his life? And what can we take? And what are the lessons? So we take people behind the scenes back into those days of the camps, and we get to see John Wooden in a different perspective. So that book, we finished it. We've turned it into the publisher, and that book will be out February of next year. So that's the most recent one that we've completed and we're working on now.
Okay, so I look forward to that in February of 2018. Before we let you go, Pat, I was just curious if you had any last words you'd like to share with our listeners.
Well, I think maybe the best thing that I could share here really is what we have written about most recently in the Success Intersection. Young people come to me particularly. They want to talk about their life. They want to talk about their career. They want to talk about what they should be doing. And I say to them, what are you good at? What do you think is your best talent? Where are you most skilled? And then I would say, and what are you excited about? What gets you up in the morning, wanting to get moving? What is your passion? And because those two are important, you can have great talent, but if you're not excited and passionate about it, that's not going to work. And you can have a great passion for something, but very little talent. So you've got to find that right balance, and the sooner you can find it in your life as a youngster, the better off you are. So that's where parents and grandparents come in, coaches and teachers and youth workers, spotting those talents or interests that young people have, and then helping them to fuel it and getting them directed and making a living out of that talent and that passion they have, even though they're young. I was that way, Chris. At age 7, I saw my first Major League Baseball game in Philadelphia, and I knew exactly then as a 7-year-old what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a ball player. And I was excited and passionate about it, and still am, even though I'm no longer wearing a uniform. But for these 50-plus years, that's what I've been doing, living with talent and passion. So that's really the best advice I can give anybody.
Well, Pat, I truly appreciate you spending some of your time with us. I can't thank you enough for both your time as well as your insight, and I look forward to hopefully speaking with you again soon.
Anytime, Chris. Nice to talk to you.
To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, taking risks, Pat shared some influential thoughts and life lessons with us. Pat discussed the importance of finding your passion in life. When he battled cancer back in 2011, he was very clear that when presented with the option of folding up and packing it in or hanging tough, there was no choice. Pat briefly spoke about the importance of never being satisfied and always striving to do and be better. With his daily habit of reading 5 different newspapers every morning and jumping on a stationary bike for 45 to 50 minutes, Pat Williams clearly is a driven individual. He also briefly touched on the importance of taking intelligent risks and how every successful person he knows at some point took a risk. We would like you to ask yourself, what intelligent, calculated risks should you take? When you have the option of packing it in or hanging tough, what choice do you make? No matter what level of success you have obtained, never be satisfied and always go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.